So, it is late April, and I'm in a jacket. That can only mean one thing in Tennessee: spring cold front. So yeah, yesterday it was 80 degrees, and then we had a line of storms come through, and the temperature bottomed out to the 50s in like just a couple of hours. And today I think I'm gonna go fishing, and I've been kind of thinking about spring cold fronts, because we're pretty far into spring. We've had a whole lot of 80-degree days, and a cold front like this can really mess with the bite. But there's a whole bunch of easy ways to go about catching fish in these kind of cold fronts. So first, let's talk about the spawning fish, because it's a little bit easier to describe the way that they act during a cold front. Whenever you're catching spawning fish, generally you're looking at them. You want to be looking at them on their beds and such. And generally, whenever they're on beds, you just want to throw a lure in there and make them mad and make them eat it. Some of them are easier to catch than others. Some of them you see and they're just really active, and they'll go right for your bait, drag it off, eat it, whatever. But whenever a cold front comes through, they might get a little bit more locked up. But they're still going to be generally on their beds, especially depending on how far into the spawn they are. Good lures for that, Texas rig, wacky rigged worm, just some of the stuff that I've been talking about lately in my last few videos. The Cinco is awesome. You can put a drop shot on and catch them like that. But you just want to get in their face and make them eat it, because a lot of times they really don't want to eat whenever it gets cold like this. It really messes them up. So whenever you have spawners like that, you just want to keep, beating them up, sort of, keep throwing your bait in there, trying to get that bite. But then you've got your post spawners and your pre-spawners. Your pre-spawners are a little bit different to catch. They might come up shallow to start with the whole bedding process and everything, but they'll go away from it whenever it gets cold like this. They'll get away from the shallow water and head a little bit deeper. The first thing that I like to do whenever I think about these pre-spawn fish is look for a break line that's close to a spawning flat. You find a place where you think that they'll spawn it, and go to the first really major break line. You can catch them on the more gradual ones, but they're more spotty. But if you can find a little ledge or some kind of drop off and just start tossing into it, you can generally find a few. It's still kind of spotty like that. If you're a bank angler, that's kind of a little bit, it's tougher, because you can't say, oh well, I'm just going to move to this spot that's a little bit deeper, this first break. But it is good whenever if you can find a deeper section from the bank. I'm lucky enough to know where there's a spawning flat, and then there's a ledge right there that I can actually get to from the bank. So getting on Navionics or Fishity or whatever to try to find these types of areas are really key whenever you're trying to catch fish during a cold front, especially if they're pre-spawn. Now, whenever I think about post-spawn fish, I'm thinking, at least for me, I'm thinking, they're heading towards the ledges and stuff whenever they get done spawning, deeper water. And you can kind of take the same general idea from the pre-spawners and put them to the post-spawners, because they're going to be heading to deeper water either way. In my experience, they're a little bit more active at times whenever they're post-spawn. You can catch them a little bit easier, and you can kind of figure out where they're going to go, because they're not just going to go straight to that break line. They're going to follow, like a channel, creek channel or something, to get back out onto those main lake ledges, humps, all that fun stuff. And you can kind of track them and figure out where they're going to go. Fishing them is a little bit different, and it's a little bit different for the pre-spawners too. So let's talk about that for a second. Whenever people think about a cold front, they think about it getting really tough to catch fish, and they downsize to a Ned rig or a drop shot or a spy bait, something like that. and that works. But there's other things that you can do with the pre-spawners and the post-spawners. You know, they're kind of out in more open areas, and you can throw something like a jerkbait or a crankbait to get that reaction bite. But there are times, you know, whenever they do stay a little bit shallow, and you can get that Ned rig bite if they're hanging close to the bottom or something like that. As I mentioned, spy bait is actually it's a finesse tactic, but it's one that you can get a reaction strike off of. And I'm willing to bet that more than 50% of the time, that's what your bites during a cold front are coming from. They're reacting to a lure. In fact, that's the way I think of fishing most of the time. I don't think that they're hungry. I think they're reacting to what they see. They don't have arms and legs. They have a mouth, though. And that's how they figure out what something is. And I feel like people really just overthink how to catch fish during a cold front, or, you know, whenever fishing gets tough. It's really not that bad. Something else that's really cool about the post-spawners and the pre-spawners, a lot of times, especially post-spawn, you can find them kind of bunched together, and that's really key in getting a bite whenever they get off beds or before they get off beds, or before they get onto beds, yeah. And you try to find something they'll react to, whether it be, you know, a drop shot or a jerkbait or a crankbait. It just depends on how concentrated these fish are, because if you can find them, that's half the battle during a cold front. They will eat. They have to eat. They're animals. They're bass, and they're awesome. Same thing with the spawners. If you can find one, or if you can find like a creek arm or something that's got a whole bunch of bluegill in it, in my experience, those fish will be a lot more active because they're trying to keep the bluegill away from their beds, so they don't eat all the eggs, the roe, whatever they're called, and generally it makes them more active. That's really one of the huge keys. If you can find beds and you can find bluegill, then you'll be all right. It might take a little bit longer to catch them, but you'll catch some fish one way or another like that. So I hope you learned at least a little something about cold front fish. Hopefully today I'll go get to use some of this knowledge, because I could really use it right now. It is 50 some odd degrees and it's been 80 all week. So thank you guys for watching this little tips and tricks kind of video from Ken Arnold Fishing. That's me. I'll see you guys right here next time.